And I think that's working now. All right, so this is our second meetup in 2020. I think first one was about 5 months ago, end of January. And yeah, we thought we'll be giving it a go and see how virtual one works. Obviously, we've managed to pick the hottest day of the year to host ours. So this may be one of the reasons why we don't have too many people joining us. Maybe we'll get a few more on the way. But yeah, we'll try and see if we can post this somewhere afterwards for the wider community to make use of it. But we have a couple of speakers today. We have Temitope Faro, who will be doing the second part of the highlights from Vue.js Amsterdam. And we also have Mark Sampson, who doesn't have a Twitter handle, hence why he's not on the list here. He's doing the first part. Both of them have talked to our events in the past, so you should be familiar with their faces. And yeah, moving on to the agenda. As usual, I'll be going through some news, and there are quite a few things that have happened in the past few months, which is great to know that everything is moving into in the Vue space and the ecosystem. It's going ahead and releasing new stuff for us to use. There is also an opportunity to win a free ticket to Vue.js Global. Vue.js Global, it's I think it's the folks from Amsterdam. They might have rebranded now, or it's something altogether different from the usual Vue.js Amsterdam. But yeah, they will be doing a second Vue.js conference at the end of the year, which will be a virtual one. And yeah, there will be some details on how to get in with a chance to win a ticket for that one. And then, as I've previously mentioned, Mark will be doing the second bit. We'll have a 5 minutes break, and then Temitope will be going through the reactivity and internals of Vue 3, and then we can wrap this up. So news, and this is, so I've kind of, I'm mentioning this from the newest to the oldest one, and this is the newest bit, which was just announced this week. The Vue Mastery folks are making their Vue 3 deep dive course free this weekend. So the course is taught by the Vue Mastery teachers. I think there are a couple of them, as well as Avenue. So I think the whole course has Avenue in there explaining concepts, explaining, yeah, pretty much everything from high-level stuff to more in-depth internals. So that will be free this weekend only. I think it's starting on Friday, actually. All you need to do is just head on to Vue Mastery, register, and you're good to go for the weekend. If you have some spare time, it would probably be a good opportunity to go through that. Vue 3 beta has been making progress. I think it's on the 15th release now. It started back in April, and I've also uploaded here. There is a presentation given by Avenue back in April when they first started working in beta with the state of Vue. It's about 30 slides, I think. Again, interesting stuff to go through in case you've missed out. And Wikimedia, it's adopting Vue. Again, it's amazing that more bigger companies are starting to use Vue. It will basically attract even more contributors, and it will strengthen the position of Vue as a framework. So if you don't know Wikimedia, it's are the guys behind Wikipedia, as well as other, yeah, it's basically like the umbrella behind Wikipedia and others. Next one, Vue Test Utils is finally out of beta. So it's been in beta for all this time until a couple of months ago. We've been trying in our team to move to this stable release, which looks pretty good. The things that we found out that it's lacking, it's some of the documentation. Most of the things are there already, but it's just not everything in one place, which makes things difficult to find. So you'll have to go through either the GitHub issues or to Stack Overflow or to their documentation or to the release changelog to find the information that you are after. But yeah, that's still work in progress. There are still some changes to be made, which they've put warnings for. So yeah, it's worth looking into. And Nuxt.js rocking with new features as always. So a few things they've added in latest releases is stuff like scanning and auto importing components. So you don't need to import components anymore. It comes with lazy loading. They are imported on the go. So all that logic is handled for you. They've added a new module called content, which is used for Markdown, JSON, YAML files, and all the other Git-based CMSs. The great thing is that you can even, it can even render components, which is absolutely fantastic. They've also added a new fetch hook, which allows content to be rendered, not just for pages as it was in the past. So really cool stuff. Make sure to check it out, especially if you're using Nuxt. And on the second slide, mostly here are documents and tutorials. So I've read this one about maybe 2 months ago now. It's really good. It comes with illustrations as well, differences in reactivity between Vue 2 and Vue 3, again from Vue Mastery, and it goes quite deep into detail on how things work underneath and what the main changes are between Vue 2 and Vue 3. There was the first Vue Global meetup, again, maybe about 6 weeks ago, and it was a quite long one. I think it was up to 3 hours, but lots of interesting topics from Nuxt to Docker to unit testing to Vuex. So they had like a proper variety of talks, and the whole event has been recorded and it's uploaded on YouTube. If you want to go in there and yeah, see what the guys talked about. And a couple of last things. Since our last event, there was the Vue.js Amsterdam conference as well as the VueConf US conference, and both of them have published their playlist with all the talks and slides on those 2 URLs. Again, if you are interested in them, make sure to check those out. I'm sure the guys, Mark and Temitope, will be going through some of the stuff from the Amsterdam one today. As I've mentioned previously, the Vue.js Global, so it's happening on August 13 and 14. That's much closer than I've thought. It's only 2 months to go, less than that actually. So it's 2 full days. Usual stuff when it comes to the talks, quite a lot of core team members and professionals, a lot of attendees, and yeah, it will be a virtual one. I don't think they've released the tickets yet, but if you want to be in with a chance of winning one of those tickets, you just head on that link there. And all you need to do, I think, is just put your name, your email, and the community that you are part of. And then you'll be automatically entered in to win one of the tickets that they will be releasing. And I think they will be coming back with a discount as well once they properly release the tickets. So I'll get back to you on that later on. So I think that is everything on my side. I will be passing to Mark now, who will be going through his part of the talk.
Nice one. Cheers, Emmanuel. I'm just going to share my screen. I think it's going to just stop you sharing as well. So, yeah. Can you see that?
Not yet.
So it's saying it wants to record my screen, and my security preferences just popped up, complaining. Later, whatever.
Yeah, all good now.
Nice one. Yeah, so cheers for the intro, Emmanuel. The Vue Mastery course, the in-depth thing, I can vouch for that. It's actually a really good course to sort of go in-depth on Vue 3 quite a little bit and sort of see how it works underneath it. And so, yeah, it's definitely worth watching if you want to know a bit more about how the composition API works. So I'm just going to go over the main sort of highlight, I guess, not highlights, but of what I've picked from Vue.js Amsterdam. And the one thing that I noticed across a lot of the talks was code reuse. And obviously the composition API, if you go into a bit more in depth on that, you're going to realize why it was mentioned a couple of times. So obviously why as well is code reuse is obviously the whole clean code ethos of keeping your code dry, so don't repeat yourself. And especially in a large organization like Money Suit Market, we use a component library across some of the teams as well. So I've definitely seen the benefit of using things such as mixins and sort of reusable components. So it's I'm definitely an advocate for it, especially my team, I'd say. So there we go. So at the minute with Vue 2, component level logic reuse is possible either using mixins or scope slots. And they work really well, but there's a few sort of subtle drawbacks and disadvantages, such as unclear variable or method origins and naming collisions, and those are related to mixins. And then if you start using scope slots, they're inherently less performant because you're creating nesting child components into child components. And then you've also got with scope slot props, they're only accessible in the template. So you're sort of restricting yourself using those reactive props within your component script tags. So yeah, let's see an example of why mixins are bad, I guess. If we look at the search mixin and this address mixin on the left, this is just real low-level pseudo code almost with the options API. So imagine the search mixin is from a third-party library, or the address mixin is from another team in your company, and they've just got some arbitrary update method. And in your address mixin, you've got the same update method. Now, the two creators of this have never spoke to each other, so they don't know if one person uses this mixin, that those will work together, because they won't. You'll get, if you use that and you add those mixins into your app, you'll get a nice view error saying you can't do this, by the way, because you've got conflicting names, you've got a naming collision there. So we can get around that by sort of adding keys to our method names or coming up with abstract names for our methods, but then you end up sacrificing readability potentially. Obviously this is it's very rare this can happen, but people who are creating component libraries and that sort of stuff are coming across these problems, and this is why we have this change. So I guess obviously Vue.js Amsterdam, Vue 3 logic reuse, how is this all related to Vue Amsterdam? So obviously, as I said, Vue 3 was a big topic, and it was the explanation of the composition API, particularly Greg Pollock's talk, who is the guy who does the Vue Mastery talks as well. And going to this, seeing him at the conference kind of encouraged me to actually sign up for a couple of months. I wasn't willing to commit for a year annual subscription, but a couple of months is definitely worth it to increase your knowledge on Vue quite a bit. So yeah, it didn't just show me the sort of what improvements Vue 3 is going to bring, but obviously the flaws of Vue 2. So yeah, super useful. This will be at the end if you want to scan that, or you can just search Intro to Composition API on YouTube, you'll find that. So what will it look like? The Options API is on the left. So imagine we have some search functionality and these lilac blocks here. This could be a method, and this could be some watcher functionality for our search functionality. So this logic at the moment is fine within the component, but if we want to extract that into its own sort of mixin, we can do that. But then obviously we have the problems that we mentioned before. So what the composition API is going to allow us to do is to bring that into one nice little block, as though it would be in a mixin, but all sort of bundled into one reusable block that could just live inside of a function potentially. So on a real basic level, how would it look, I guess? So this is super pseudo again. It's just really basic explanation of what we're going to be able to do with the composition API. So say we have a format foo component function in our case and a format bar function. What we're going to be able to do is pull out some logic, put it into another function, and this could be reactive if we wanted later down the line, and then reuse that in multiple components, literally as we are here. So it would be const capitalized foo, but yeah. So obviously we could do that with the Options API at the moment. We could pull it out into a, oh, sorry. We're going to go back, there we go. So we could pull it out into a computed property and reuse that, and that would, again, that would work perfectly fine. But let's say for some reason, whatever, we wanted to have some sort of encapsulated before mount hook associated to this capitalized function. The only way we'd be able to do that is to use a mixin. So again, we end up with the disadvantages we mentioned earlier. So I guess how would it look like the composition API? So if we wanted to have that same functionality with the computed capitalized bar property, we could simply, I say simply, but we would use a composition API like this. We would first of all create a setup function, then we would make a reactive reference with bar, and we would call our capitalize function. As we mentioned earlier, we can extract our logic out into simple functions now. Name it or rename it as we want, and then return an object of capitalized bar, which is this computed property and the reactive reference of bar. And then what this is allowing us to do is to expose whatever we want to the template to. So yeah, I won't go too much into the computed, how that stuff works or anything like that, but I'm sure Tope is going to cover that stuff. But all I will say is you have to return it as an object here. So if we look at the disadvantages again, or if we go over those previously, when we were using mixins and we had the mixin option, we weren't sure where our variables were coming from. We would struggle to trace those if we had multiple mixins and we had multiple references to those mixins within our Options API. And now, instantly using this syntax, we're able to associate this capitalized word comes from the capitalized function straight away. So that's that problem solved. The second problem was going to be if we have naming collisions for multiple sources of reusable logic. So if we had another another piece of logic here, which was brought in from another library, which had a camel case perhaps, and it churned out the word the result of capitalized word, we could then rename it as we please, and that would avoid that. So instantly we've solved two problems just going down this route. So yeah, that's the basics of it, and that's why I'm kind of excited to have a go. I've been having a bit of a play around with it, and it's quite interesting. So the side effects of the composition API, just wanted to point out another thing and try and windle this in somehow. Again, this will be on the last slide. So Damien Dulitz, I think is how you pronounce it, maybe. But yeah, he is the creator of Vuelidate, and they are releasing a new version for Vue 3. And what this is going to allow us to do is, which is a problem that I've had with the library actually, is you can't have child level sort of validation and then know the status of that validation. So if I just pull up an example of what this is going to look like. So if we have our basic app, so we've got the setup function, and we've just got a little form here with username and password, and just another little input there. So if we wanted to create a reusable component, fully reusable with its own validation as well, at the moment, with the current state of Vuelidate, we would have to have props that we pass down, say error, and then all our validation rules, if you know Vuelidate, have to live at the parent scope if you want to pass those down, or you'd have to create a Vuex module perhaps, or some sort of event bus to keep that reactive. And just quickly, how Vuelidate works is if you had a data and it returned just foo, your validations have to map that, and then you put your rules within the validation object. So I guess what this new syntax is going to allow us to do is we still create our static rules, so which would model our data, and then obviously, of course, our data is just a ref at the moment, so we'd have to build that model up and then just pass it into a used Vuelidate function. Now, what this function is going to allow us to do in future is pass a third argument of and just a string that you want to name your validation rules as, and then the parent scope will have access to this on build time. So your name, you could pass it name validation, and then in your app, you're going to be able to say $v dot name validation. So it really helps you sort of encapsulate all your validation rules and sort of keep everything at the component level, which is, like I say, a little problem I've had with that. So yeah, that's kind of just a quick spiel, I guess. Thanks for listening. For those who are here, obviously we've got a hot competition, I guess you could say, to excuse the pun. But yeah, that's me. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Mark. Before we head for the break, are there any questions for Mark on any of the topics that he covered? I guess I can ask one with the Vuelidate one. Will you be in your code example? You've showed how you will be you'll be passing that third argument, which is the named, I think, rule that you could use down in your child components. You'll have to create. I would assume you'll create one of those for each of your child components, right?
Yeah. So obviously, as I was saying, it would be at the sort of where your inputs live. So it would probably most likely be the lowest level of where your validation rules would live. So if you've got an input with just modeling a name, and you've got your name reference here, you just name it whatever you like. I think that's definitely an approach that we would end up taking in our team, because at the moment we're using we're modeling our Vuex state instead of injecting from the app level into all our components. And yeah, I just think it gets a little bit messy at the minute. So I think this is going to really improve the validations. So.
Okay, and I can't remember, or I'm not sure whether this was mentioned. I know in the past when the reactivity was first discussed, there were a couple of options of making properties reactive on the go. One of them was with ref, as you've showed. I can't remember the other one. I don't know whether you know about it, but yeah, I've seen it. I've seen you using ref, and I was wondering whether, like, why would you prefer ref against the other one, if you have any pros and cons at this point?
Yeah, so I don't want to. I wasn't going to discuss that too much, but there is another which is reactive, and it just returns a. I think it looks something like this, but there's a lot of edge cases where you end up, if you have an array, you have to create a reactive ref array or something. But I've not had a lot of looking into that, but I think you can do something like this. But I think Tope might cover that a little bit more in depth.
Okay, no worries, thank you. I think that may be it. No questions from Alex, and nobody else said anything. So we will, yeah, end it there. Cool. And we'll have Topi doing his bit next.
Hello, hello everyone. Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we're gonna have 5 minutes pizza break and
yeah, grab a beer.
Grab a beer.
Some ice cream.
Sunny, some ice cream. What's going on, everyone?
Give me a slice, please.
Yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Temitope Faro. I'm gonna share my screen. Start two. First, let me share. All right, can you see my screen? Does that work?
No.
Sure. Okay.
Not yet. Maybe you have something similar that Mark had, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not pop up yet though. So it's sharing at the moment. It says sharing, yeah. I'm gonna try again.
Oh, it's up now.
So can you still see it?
Yeah, yeah.
So you should be seeing the PowerPoint.
Yeah, that's working, mate.
Great. Yeah, so I think I wanted to start by saying I was one of the lucky ones that entered the draw for the Vuejs Amsterdam, and luckily got to win. And I think we went to this in February now. It wasn't my first time in Amsterdam, but this was the first time going for the tech conference. So I went together with Mark. It was quite fun. There were a lot of topics covered. There was a lot of energy. I think the whole environment was like really good. I had like a lot of fun. A lot of topics there's quite a lot of excitement on TypeScript. So I think one of the big shifts in Vue.js 3 is that TypeScript is kind of like first class. And that's been made possible by the kind of rewriting proposition API. There's a lot of talks around other really close third-party libraries that are like things like Vue test tools, things like Vuex, things like Vue. We're trying to like get prepared for the Vue Next, which is the Vue 3. It's still called Vue Next at the moment. There's a lot of talks about reactivity, and then preparing for this talk today. Because there are like a lot of really great talks, I kind of struggled to come up with a topic, but I've decided to go with reactivity and internals. I want to give Sarah Drasner, who gave the original talk at the conference, and she really did a very good job on it. A video is going to be on the links that Emmanuel will share. She did a really good job, so I think I would advise everyone to like watch that. So yeah, Vue.js 3, reactivity and internals. So why choose a topic like reactivity? And so I think everyone here builds like front-end applications. And when building these front-end applications, usually attacks like create really good user interfaces, which is called consistent, responsive. And one thing about reactivity is in Vue is that allows you to do stuff like this really easy. You can have different data around the place, and then once you change one data, the other one gets updated. And it kind of like really makes a big difference in how you create user experiences that are actually correct, because you're spending time actually working on the application and not spending time working on making sure the data is updated where it's supposed to update. You can actually focus on the actual features instead of worrying about data consistency and stuff. So I think that's why reactivity is kind of like a big topic. So what is reactivity? One of the classic example that people use for reactivity, which is quite interesting because I didn't know about the example before going to the conference, but it kind of makes sense, is the behavior in Excel sheets. So, so this is a screenshot taken from Excel sheet where you have two fields, X and Y. You define two values. You put in like some calculation. So this is like sum B1, B2. And once you've done this, you can see that the sum just keeps updating. And if you make changes later on, it just updates. So I use something like this for like my budget planning, where I have like the different views and just put the formulas and just works out everything. So this is kind of like reactivity from Excel point of view. And to do the same thing in JavaScript, you would think you could do something like let X equal to 5. So one of the things I try to do for this talk is take a lot of like code snippets, just like talk about them. So X equal to 5, Y equal to 4, sum equal to X plus Y. And we'll assume that sum should be 9 at this point. So you log sum, you get 9. But then when you, unlike Excel sheet, when you change Y equal to 6, sum you think should change to 10. But if you do just this, you still get 9 back. So this does not work. And the whole point of this talk is about how does Vue.js do reactivity and what can we learn to like do some of this ourselves. So what is reactivity? How do you achieve the same thing I just showed in Vue? For Vue 2, for example, I'm assuming everybody's like familiar with Vue 2. I think it's the one currently in production. For Vue 2, you have something like this. You have your data, num1, num2, and this is what makes, once you put stuff in data, return it as an object, this is what makes it a reactive variable. And sum here gets updated, so becomes available in your template as well. So for this snappush template, you have num1, num2, and sum available for you to use. And when num1 and num2 changes, your sum gets updated automatically. So this is kind of like how you would achieve the same thing in Vue 2. And but in Vue 3, how do you achieve similar? For Vue 3, use composition API. Basically, you still have your optional API available in Vue 3, but if you want to use the new composition API, you do something like this. You have a setup method. You have two variables, num1 and num2. So ref here is where the magic comes in. So ref here creates a reactive variable, which is num1. And we do the similar thing for num2. So the value in the ref, the value, the argument you're passing to ref is the initial value. So that creates a reactive element for you. And there you have function sum, which then returns the sum of this. So every time you call that method, it kind of like returns it for you. I can say this is not like an exact like for like method. I'll cover something that does something like computed for you later on. But this is just trying to give an idea of how do we create reactive variables in Vue. So this is the high level, and this talk is about diving into the low level of how Vue is able to do this. So reactivity in Vue, like I said before, Vue has always made it really easy to do reactivity, as we seen from the last example. Vue 3 even makes it like really much more easier in the sense that in Vue 2, when you're thinking about reactivity, you have to think about it in terms of components or mixins where you have data. But with Vue 3, using the composition API, you can literally have like a regular application that has nothing to do with Vue, and then you can get reactivity for free by using the composition API because it's not tightly coupled. So I think, and understanding how that works allows us to like probably push the limits and then try some more advanced things. So let's see other reasons to like understand how Vue reactivity works. There are kind of some shortcomings in Vue 2 with how Vue 2 does this reactivity, which I hope to cover in this talk. Another thing that this allows us to do is squeeze additional performance from Vue, and also try to like use the advanced features from composition API, which we'll be covering. So this talk will be trying to like talk about how can we achieve reactivity like from scratch, from ground up, and understanding that kind of gives you like a better understanding of Vue's internal. You can be able to contribute to their source code, but it also means that when you have bugs or surprises, you're able to like understand what exactly is going on in your code. So for you to do reactivity, there are 3 core things that you need to be able to do. You need to be able to detect when there's a change in one of the values. So if you're, you also need to be able to track the function that changes it. And then you need to also be able to trigger the function so that you can update the final value. So these are kind of the 3 key things or 3 features of any reactivity implementation. You want to detect when there's change, track the change, and then trigger, do something when the change happens. So I think most times in a Vue.js company, you're probably rendering the template as the case needs. So I feel like instead of just diving into Vue 3, it's going to be interesting to see how Vue 2 has done reactivity. So Vue 2 builds reactivity based on this JavaScript function called via the JavaScript API called object.defineProperty. And basically, you just need to override the get and set method. This API was introduced in ES5. And what this means is that so this is the reason why in Vue 2, I8 and below is not supported because of the API that is based upon, most of the activity is based upon. So how do you detect a change using the object.defineProperty? So given a state like this, so this is just a JavaScript object, so state with a value hello world, and you want to be able to detect when a user changes the state of value. In the next screenshot, we have, so this is kind of like some code snippet that shows you how you can do that. We have value equal to state of value. We have define property state value. So you create a get method and a set method. I've taken screenshots, so there's a missing comma after the get method, so that we have this red line. But basically, if you do something like this, you get some listeners. So when you try to do the get value, this returns the actual value to you. And if you can actually put in interceptions in here. So just before return, if you want to do something before the get, you can actually insert a line. And if you want to do something like in this example, we're just logging, enter the user called set, we print out updating new value. When I was working on this, like I felt like this is kind of probably how things like rule-bar and some other internal libraries will be working. This is how they know when changes occur. And then now if you look at the third screenshot, state of value goodbye world, this will output goodbye world, even though we're just setting the value. But because you have like a listener defined there, we have this set method being overridden. You get this for free. So at runtime, Vue 2 would, so what happens at the actual, so that's like a really trivial, simple example. But what happens in Vue is that every object that is declared as data, Vue 2 will create a getter and setter method for each one to make it reactive. This is not supported by I8 and below. And every time you change the data, it just causes it to render basically. So that's kind of like a quick example of how Vue 2 sort of does this reactivity. And one interesting fact, which I feel like we might be aware of already, is if you try to print out the value in your state or in value in one of your Vue components, you would notice that in the states, you just don't have state.value. You have state, you have the get methods and set value methods, which is basically, it's basically saying that state is a reactive element. Yes, it's not just a plain object. So I think it will be worth knowing some caveats in Vue 2 reactivity. So with Vue 2, because it's based on object.define, you can just add a new property into the object. So you can't really do a lot of dynamic stuff by adding a dynamic new property. If you add a dynamic new property, it's not going to be reactive. So Vue is not going to know about it. It's not going to know about the life cycle. But there's a way to achieve this. So if you want to add a new object dynamically, you can do it using the keyword Vue.set. So you pass in the data, the new property, and the initial value if you have one. But because this is like not, it's different from the way you would expect. And what happens that this kind of leads to like bugs. If you don't use Vue.set, you don't get the new property added correctly. Some other caveats is the funny way array works and removing properties as well. And all of this is based on the restrictions of defined property based on the object API. And all of this can basically lead to debugging pain. So now that we know about how Vue2 reactivity works, is based on object or defined property. It has some positives, it has some caveats. So let's talk about Vue3 reactivity. So one of the key things that Evan Yu, yeah, it was nice meeting Evan Yu at the conference. It was really like straightforward. Yeah. One of the things that they kept emphasizing was that Vue3 was built up from scratch again. And it was written to take advantage of the proxy API, which is a new JS feature, I think, introduced in ES6. This means that it's supported by, I think, IE11. I think it's IE11 backwards based on where proxy was introduced. And the good thing about proxy is that it provides a lot of solutions around the problems that we were facing in Vue2. And because we're using proxies, it means that you can actually get fancy and do cool stuff, which is why they were able to write the composition API, which is basically a more loose coupled way of doing reactivity. So what are proxies? A proxy is basically an object that wraps another object that you want to actually observe. And then once you start observing, you can start intercepting the operations being made. Back again to the three things required for reactivity. You want to be able to detect when there's a change in one of the values. You want to be able to track the function that changes it, and you want to be able to trigger the function so that it can update the final value. So these are the kind of three things: detect, track, and trigger. Then we can call that DTT, trademark. So how do you detect changes in Vue3 using proxy? So again, you have your states with the value hello world. And given your state hello world, the second expression, which should be this, I've got my animations wrong. I think Sarah did a better job, to be honest. So given this proxy, what we're doing is I'm creating a new proxy, passing in the state object at the left side. You have a get method again, and target is the object, and property is the key. So here, return target or property sets. And basically, once you've done this, you get your reactivity. Basically, you get the detecting parts. You can basically know when the get method is called and when the set method is called, and you can actually override it. So when I do proxy.value, it sets the value and then logs out the goodbye word. So this is basically the same similar thing that we showed with object.define property, which is what Vue2 was using, and this kind of similar in Vue3. But this takes the first box about how do you detect changes. In terms of tracking changes, similar screenshot that we've seen before, but now I've introduced this method called track. Now this track, from my understanding, is an internal method that is used everywhere in the Vue.js 3 rewrite, but basically this is what the method you call when you want to tell Vue.js to save changes. So basically what Vue.js does is that anytime you call a get, you intercept the method and then save the changes basically. So this is how you track what's going on. So that's the latest change in that screen. And then the next one is how do you trigger? So trigger like run listeners that change. The way Vue3 does is run listeners is via the trigger keyword. These are all like Vue.js 3 internals. You thoroughly could write your own trigger method. And while preparing for this topic, I found like several articles about actually writing everything from scratch if you really want to. But if you're working with the Vue.js 3 internals, you can just use this track method and trigger, which is available. So building up on that, we have the Reflect API, which allows us to bind this properly. So I've just introduced the Reflect API. Reflect.get and reflect.set, passing in the list of arguments. So this basically allows you to bind the this properly. Yeah. So the point of this is just trying to show us what Vue.js 3 does internally. And then how do you check for changes before running update/trigger? So building on from the last example, we now have our track function, we now have our trigger function, but this is saying that before you trigger the changes, you can actually check if the value has changed. So this is saying if old value is not equal to results, then trigger. And this kind of stuff is how Vue 3 is able to like make sure that it's not calling, it's not triggering a UI update of VS.DOM change when the data has naturally changed. So if you set like a variable to 2 and then you just set it to 2 again, you don't expect your UI to like run or do any changes. So that sort of covers at a high level, the internal way Vue.js 3 has done reactivity. I think the key takeaway for me is that Vue.js 3 is based on proxies. It's a full rewrite, so it's supposed to be faster and lighter. It's also solves the problem from Vue 2. And that this code snippet shows you at a high level how Vue 3 is able to do the detect, trap, and trigger DTT for reactivity. One thing I did cover, so that shows you, so another thing that is worth mentioning is watchers. So watchers looks like this in, no, that's the wrong screenshot. But watchers basically is used for like watching for when there's a change in a value. And to do the same thing in Vue 3, I think I've got a computer example, but to do the same thing in Vue 3, it's sort of based on the Vue, based on JavaScript and data structures, set, map, and weak map. And basically, what Vue.js 3, what Vue 3 does in terms of reactivity is that it keeps track of all the reactive data and the dependencies in a weak map. And then anytime there's a change, it just goes through all the list of data structures and then finds the relevant listener to call, and then uses that to like kind of know when it changes. So the actual talk for this was, I think Sarah tried to put everything to like, was it about 40 minutes or so? And I've just tried to squeeze everything in like maybe 20 minutes here. So I've just done a bit high level, but I think the key takeaway for me was just that having enough information to know if I need to do some deep diving, this is how to do the deep diving. And if I want to like contribute to the Vue.js 3 open source library, this kind of gives me like a high level of how it works and what to do and stuff. And I think it's kind of like also fulfills my nerd craving, I guess. So yeah, I hope you guys have found it enjoyable. Thank you.
Great, thank you for the talk. Any questions for Temitope before we wrap up?
I have one question. If I wanted to take some of those basic examples from Vue 2 and then migrate to using the latest and greatest with Vue 3 and benefit from the proxies, is that migration difficult or is it straightforward?
Yeah, so if you wanted to use reactivity in Vue 2, is that a question? Sorry,
no, just the questions around, I've got legacy code, it's in Vue 2, I need to move it to Vue 3. Is it a really big thing? Is it a lot of breaking changes, or how complex is it? Yeah, so I think migrating applications to Vue 3 right now definitely won't recommend because Vue 3 is not even stable yet. So this Vue 3 is still in next stages. It's still currently called Vue Next. So Vue 3 is still like in writing. It's not yet ready to like be used in production. But what is ready to be used in production is then the composition API. And that's like easy to use, I believe, because it basically gives you the same thing that you get from today's Vue 2, but using the composition API. So what that means is that you're more prepared to move to Vue 3. So with composition API, you get the same thing that you get in Vue 2. And then you can include your composition API in your today's Vue 2 projects.
I was gonna build up on this slide and do some like live demo. I'm gonna blame lockdown and some. But to be honest, it's like really easy. It's really super easy from what I've seen so far using composition API. I don't know if any other person has some experience to share, but it's usually pretty.
Yeah, there's a node module you can install. It's just called @vue/composition API, and if you just do vue.use composition API or that import, you can just start using the setup functions and all, however you want. And then I think Toby had an example where he imported sort of ref and computed from that composition API node module. You can do that and sort of use it and have a play around with Vue too.
Yeah,
All right.
and it just works. It really just works. I've tried it and it just works.
Wow.
I think also with the nature of Vue and with Vue 3, as far as I'm aware, they don't intend on bringing any breaking changes. As it's also a progressive framework, they leave this composition API up to the developer, whether they choose to, even if they use Vue 3, they can still write everything in Vue 2 sort of ways of working. But if you think like your application needs to use composition API and makes more sense to use it, then yeah, you are free to sort of level up your application from there.
Yeah, and I think because the bit I would like to like kind of investigate to see how it is going to work, but I don't see why it should be any different. So we have like Vue.js applications, and so the reactivity data stuff, will just work if you switch to composition API. But the bit I've not really given a lot of thought is the Vuex stuff. So the stuff that you get from state already. Yeah. There was this library that was demoed by, is it Delete? Definitely check the playlist that Emmanuel is going to share. There was a talk about using Vuex in Vue 3 or with composition API. Some dude wrote one of the core guys wrote a personal library for that. But I think for my production systems, I would rather want to see how the composition API works with Vuex. And I know that Vuex is being rewritten for Vue 3. So that's the bit I can't really answer yet. How does it work with Vuex?
Okay, cool. And are you guys looking to use composition API then going forwards? Or is it too early to sort of introduce it?
Emmanuel, I'm happy to answer, but I think there's no reason stopping us from using composition API.
I think at this point it's probably,
because you have your proper testing in place. If you get like I'm not going to rewrite my existing application that works in composition API immediately, maybe not. But if I was adding a new component or if I was working on a new project, I'll be trying to see what composition API will give me. If I can answer the Vuex question, I think that's the only one I've not really answered yet. The Vuex, how does it integrate to Vuex?
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool.
Yeah, I think it's a bit early now. And as Topi said, I think part of the migration will happen as you start writing new components. I think you could trial out the composition API and new functionality from Vue 3 while you write new functionality. And with time, I think, the migration will happen naturally almost.
Cool, I'll be interested to try that out myself, take a look at the documentation, but that was really good. Cheers, guys.
Yes.
All right, so to wrap this up, I'm gonna share my screen again, which I think is coming back with my little minion, hopefully. And yeah, coming up next, I think we, obviously with the situation that is going on, it's very unlikely that we'll be back in the old format with physical events and pizzas and beer anytime soon. Even if offices are due to reopen later on in the year, I think they will still most likely be trying to avoid doing any external events and trying to limit the external amount of people that are visiting the office. So I think we'll be giving another few tries, hopefully on less warmer days for our meetups going forwards, and see how future events work and if there are people interested in attending them. But yeah, the main idea is for the next one to be in early August. And I have a couple of talks in my mind. One of them is modern front-end routing. So I've already done a talk on this topic for my team a couple of months ago, and it touches on the internal of routing from a Vue point of view and how it works. So it goes a bit deeper into history API, into matcher, into components, and how everything works from the URL and how changes are tracked. So that's one of the things I have in mind. And also another thing that I was basically considering past few months was doing another Hello World. And I was kind of waiting for Vue 3 to mature enough and actually have that as the main focus. I think it will be a good, we didn't have one of these in maybe a couple of years now. And I think if we are doing one of those, it will be a workshop sort of format. Well, I'll maybe do the whole driving and run through the very basics of Vue 3 and some of the Vue 2 stuff. Hopefully we'll be attracting more beginners that way who will be staying with us going forwards. But yeah, if Vue 3 doesn't advance too much, then I'll probably do the front-end routing one. And I'll be looking for a second speaker to join me. So yeah, if you want to get involved, you know the drill, just pop me a message and we can talk logistics, and I can help you with the talk as well. And yeah, I guess that's it. Thanks to MRJ. No food and drinks this time, but they've gladly shared their Zoom with us, so we could host it and record it. And I guess that's it. I will send some links later on with the recorded talk. Hopefully it all went well there, as well as my slides for you guys to check the links that I have in there. And yeah, thanks again for joining. And hopefully you'll get a couple more hours to enjoy the sun outside.
Yeah, cheers. Bye.
Thank you.
Cool, guys. Stay safe.
Cheers, guys. On you well. See you later.